Hi guys, my name is Tiffany and welcome back to episode 2 of Tiny Tips with Tiff season 3. So in this series, my focus is all about going back to the basics, and in this episode, I kind of want to discuss with you guys on ways to console your crying baby. So I have my NICU baby with me right here. This is my patient, and I wanted to share with you guys some techniques on ways to console your patient. So obviously the number one basic thing you can use is a pacifier to help console them. A lot of times it usually works, and it's pretty simple. You just give them the pacifier and make sure that they're swaddled pretty tight, and usually that actually helps a lot. So I gave my patient her passy, and usually that helps calm her down. But if that doesn't work, then obviously we'll go to some other techniques. So the next thing I usually always do when I go in and check on my patient and the pacifier is it working and they're still unconsolable, crying and all those things, is check the diaper. So I have some patients who are extremely sensitive, and honestly I probably would be too if I had a wet diaper, and so I always make sure to check the diaper and see if there's any poop or any pee in there, and usually that always does the trick. Sometimes babies just get fussy because their diaper is wet and they feel uncomfortable, and that's totally understandable. So the next step I usually will do is change my patient's diaper, and a lot of times that also works as well. And that's also a tip I always tell my parents as well when they're in the room, that if their baby is crying and nothing is consoling, like you're holding them and they're not being consoled, just check the diaper. A lot of times that usually is another next step. But let's say those two things don't work. You're holding, trying to console them and things like that, and they're still uncomfortable, still crying, still fussy. Then the next thing I usually will do, I'll tell people that for patients who have an OG, is to check and see if there's air in the belly. So I have patients who get super uncomfortable and very, very gassy. And if they have an OG and they're having oxygen go through, a lot of times their bellies get distended with so much air, and it makes them so uncomfortable that they will start crying. And think about that. If you had a lot of air in your belly and you're very gassy and bloated, you don't feel comfortable, and babies just don't have a lot of space and room for their bellies to expand, so it hurts them. So what I usually will do is I will grab just an oral syringe, and I will just pull air out of my baby's belly, and a lot of time the decompression of air just really helps to relieve a lot of that tense buildup in their stomachs, and it helps with a lot of pain. But in conjunction with that as well, I do have some times where my patients are just so gassy. Let's say they don't have an OG that I can pull air out of, and they're just so bloated, so gassy. I hear them farting and they're just so uncomfortable. And for us, as adults, it's probably a lot easier, but for babies, like, there's no really way for them to like burp out and escape that air. For us, it can be a little bit easier. For babies, unless you're burping them after feed or stuff like that, it's very hard to get that air out of their belly. So what I will do as another consoling, soothing mechanism, but this one you have to be very, very careful about, is getting a heel warmer and putting it on their belly. So I always make sure to wrap my patient first and swaddle them. So make sure to check out the previous video where I taught you guys how to swaddle. But I will try to swaddle them and then put this underneath their bellies, outside of the swaddle blanket, because this one can get pretty hot, and you of course obviously don't want to burn your patient. So I make sure to swaddle them in a blanket first, and then I'll put it on their bellies, and you can put them prone, and obviously make sure to keep them safe if they are laying prone. But I would like to keep them prone, or you can also hold them as well and try to keep the warmer on their bellies while you're holding them, and that way that warm feeling just makes it very easy for the air to kind of come out, or at least make them feel more comfortable. Because honestly, for me, there's times where I feel bloated, and TMI, but especially during my period, I get very bloated, and I do have a warming pack, a heating pack, that I can plug into the wall, and I wear it on my stomach, and it just feels so much comfortable. It helps with cramping and stuff like that. So it's kind of like the same concept, using a heating pack and putting on the baby's belly. It just helps to relieve some of that pain, and so hopefully that is helpful as well. And then obviously, of course, the other tip is swaddling them tightly. So some of our babies like to be swaddled very tight, or some of our babies don't like to be swaddled at all. So of course, assess your patient, see what they like to prefer. But I do notice that with babies, when they're swaddled very tightly, they end up actually being a little bit more comfortable. It feels like the womb for them, and so I try to swaddle my babies very tightly, and then I'll kind of hold them as a soothing mechanism. But another thing I truly enjoy doing, and one thing I loved about night shift, shifts is that I love giving baths. Baths is one of my favorite things that I love to do for my patients. And so a lot of times they just sleep a lot better. They're a lot more comfortable. Some of our babies get super hot and sweaty. And honestly, for me, I hate that feeling. And so I have to shower every single day. And so for some of our babies, you know, if you don't give them a bath, they're just so hot, sticky, uncomfortable. And for our patients that sweat a lot too, I give them baths every day. So that feeling of, you know, just warm water, getting all that grossness off of you, it's just a very comfortable feeling as an adult that I'm pretty sure as a baby, they truly enjoy that as well. And every time I give a bath to my patients, especially if I know my patient is a fussy patient, I will give them a bath whether it's due or not. And I will give it at any time of the day. If I am working day shift and I have a very fussy patient, I will give them a bath just because they end up doing a lot better. And if that technique doesn't work, at least you know you ruled it out and you tried and attempted it. And sometimes the baths do a majority of the trick, and 90% of the time it works for me. So that's also another tip you can do as well. And lastly, of course, another obvious tip that you could probably do is use a swing. If your unit has swings available for your patient, definitely use that. If your parents are there and available, have them hold the baby. Those are really some of the soothing techniques and mechanisms that I have in order for you to console your patient. But literally, if none of those work, then there is something wrong and you need to be letting your team know to maybe offer some pain management for your patient or something to help soothe and sedate them, just because obviously whatever your patient is dealing with, whether they just had a procedure that happened or just whether they're a patient that's like a chronic patient and they're dealing with chronic pain, that they just need medication. And sometimes you trying to delay it will actually further cause more problems. And so, of course, always do the least pharmacological measurements first. And so all these techniques and tips that I have for you here, definitely try them out first before resorting to those things. But of course, if your patient needs the meds, they need the meds. And so just doing whatever you can beforehand. And then if none of these tips and techniques work for you, then definitely let your team know. And that way you can assess and see maybe your patient really does need pain management. So hopefully this video is helpful for you guys on some of the tips and ways you can help soothe your crying baby. Let me know down in the comments below what other videos you would like to see in this series, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.